Good evening and welcome to New Foundation Unity. This is our fifth in the series of Journey to the Promised Land. If you have any difficulties, technical difficulties, viewing or hearing, email mark@truthunity.net, and later on there will be a chance for questions. And the phone number here, 816-301-6304. So as we begin our time together, I invite you to close your eyes, become still, and remember that basic truth that there is one power, one presence, one life, one mind, one source, and we are one with that one. That source that is within us contains everything that we would ever need, require, or desire. Guidance, creative ideas, abundance, healing, peace of mind. They have always been there, but our journey is to learn to access them in the silence. And so for a few minutes in the silence, let us rest in that awareness of that infinite source, God's infinite storehouse of good that awaits our claiming in the silence. I am open and receptive to God's infinite storehouse of good. And now, as we begin to return our attention to this time and this place, we give thanks that we have access to the source of all good that is within us. And for an awareness of that truth, we do give thanks in the name and through the power of that living, loving Christ presence that lives within us all. Amen. Last week, we ended with Moses having completed his mission. And so I would like to begin this evening, partly by way of review and partly by way of giving you something to think about. Moses, as you recall, has had 3 phases of 40 years each. And this is a question that you might want to journal. What phase in your life are you in? Are you in the Egyptian phase, where there's the beginning of a realization that human consciousness can't overcome the challenges? Burying Egyptians in the sand of our subconscious is bound to come up at an inappropriate time? Have you already fled to Midian, where you go into the silence of Horeb, he came face to face with God in the burning bush. And reluctantly, but eventually, he accepted his mission. And he trusted his path enough to act on it. Have you accepted your mission? And do you trust the path, knowing that it is leading for more good in your life and for all concerned? Perhaps you've already begun that trek through the wilderness. You know there are many obstacles, but you have been assured that the presence and power of God is within you to carry you through. And last week, Moses, after all the murmuring, and remember, all these characters are within us. We start on this path, and there are times when we wish we could turn back. But the truth is, you can't turn back. And Moses continues until he has fulfilled his mission, which was to give an understanding to the Israelites, an understanding of God as law. Now, Joshua has a different mission. We'll start on that in a moment. Now, the 10 Commandments. Here's my second question for you. The commandments are divided into the first 3 relate to spirit, the second 2 relate to soul or consciousness, and the final 5 relate to body and behavior. I suggested last time that one is the most important, because if you have mastered the first commandment, you've mastered all of them. But it's not enough to just say and to affirm, even to know intellectually that there's only one power and one presence. We have to have a way to develop consciousness so that that can be a living reality for us. So while one is the most important commandment, and the other, number 2 and 3, are commentaries upon that, we might want to reflect on the various ways that we fall away from that truth. What is it that triggers us to say, one power and one presence? Oh, but there are some times when I feel victimized, and then there's 2. Or there's some times when there's a trauma in the environment, and then suddenly God is not present. We cannot have God present and absent in awareness. So number 4, I submit to you, and I'm open to challenges here, but number 4 being the foundation, is the way to master number 1. Number 4, the number of foundation. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. But at what level do you understand that? For some people, that's a day of rest. You don't work. You relax. You have weekends. And for others, it is, the inner meaning is that you take time to go within and experience that source. Each day, take time each day until you become a regular visitor to that source within you. And as you do that, our awareness of it expands. And number 5, of course, the thinking and feeling, honor your father and mother. We have to have those aspects of ourselves in harmonious relationship so that spirit can come through. Number 4, very significant, it is Dalet in Hebrew. That numbers are letters, letters are numbers, and so Dalet is number 4, foundation. It is the door into spirit, into that spiritual realm. Okay. If you do that, if all the inner work is done here in soul or consciousness, then all of these 5 relating to body and behavior are automatically taken care of. So spirit is perfect, God is, but the work needs to be done in consciousness so we can become aware of that one power, active, present, living, moving, and being within us. Moses also received another revelation, which also we talked about last week, which was building a tabernacle. There was much discussion about this tabernacle, and the reason for the tabernacle I would like to call your attention to, which is in Exodus 25, verse 8. That is the purpose of the tabernacle. So God can dwell in the midst of us. All right? So we are all in the process of building a tabernacle. That is a physical structure that will be a suitable dwelling place for the Ark of the Covenant. Now, most of the things we talked about last week are already there. The Ark of the Covenant, that is that divine spark that has been implanted in us from the beginning. It's made of gold. In those days, they believed that God lived in that ark. So we have that. We also have the lampstand of God. Our physical structure is a picture of the menorah, where the central candle is the heart. And it nourishes and strengthens the three energy centers below and above, so that every aspect of our physical nervous system is activated and strengthened and nourished and able to support that divine spark. We also have showbread. Showbread, those 12 breads that are arranged in a particular order and sprinkled with frankincense. That represents our 12 faculties, which as that Christ begins to grow in us, those structures also begin to emerge through faith. Frankincense is the oil that is related to faith. Okay, we also have within us the innate functions of being able to raise our frequency to the vibration of the Creator. And when we do that, we also have the capacity to delete any misinformation that has gotten into the cells that disrupts the functioning of the whole system. And we have the ability to renew and to restore. This is all in the essential oils, which represent love. When we know our oneness with the source, those innate functions begin to function perfectly. We have a built-in intelligent healing system within us. We have lavers. Those are bowls of water for cleansing. We have that ability to cleanse. And even the garments. Remember the breastplate in which was over the heart and where guidance was received. So what else do we need? If it's already there, this promised land is not something out here that we're on our way to. There is no journey in an outer way to the promised land. It's just a matter of going deeper until we find it. So what is needed is the structure in consciousness that can accommodate that full flow of divine energy. We're hardwired to do it, but it requires a very disciplined daily practice of going into the silence until we become that living source. Okay. And we talked about the temple too. The temple comes later. Solomon, we have to wait for Solomon, who asked for an understanding heart. David did not get to build the temple because he used force to unify the 12 tribes. Okay, so Deuteronomy. This is found in Deuteronomy chapter 6, where it is written that the purpose of the law is to practice it. Oh my. I gave you these laws so that you would do them as you go into the promised land. All right? Because these laws, it is being said, are what allow you to live in a state of consciousness in the promised land. Well, Moses, as you know, Moses doesn't get to go. And there's a lovely prayer in the 27th chapter of Numbers where he says, "Let the Lord choose a man of courage, a man who can come in and go out," which is an idiom in Aramaic that means who will do whatever is assigned to him. And that is Joshua. So the Lord says, okay, so Joshua is going to do it. As we mentioned last time, Joshua has the same roots as Jesus. His name means the same thing as Jesus. But he's not as fully expressed a Christ as Jesus. But nonetheless, we begin to see that Christ nature within Joshua. So, if you have your Bibles open, go to the first chapter of Joshua, and you will see right from the beginning that he has something that the people in the wilderness did not have, which was the absolute willingness to do whatever was necessary. And you can ask yourselves always, do I have the courage? Do I have the absolute commitment, the willingness to go through the challenges that I know lie ahead in order to establish myself in the promised land? Many have come to believe that old adage that ignorance is bliss. Life certainly is a lot easier when you didn't have those high standards. So in Joshua chapter 1, here is Joshua's first instruction. Arise. Okay. Moses, servant, my servant is dead. Now therefore arise. It takes a new consciousness to go to the promised land. All right? That's what arise is. Rise up in consciousness. Go over this Jordan. The Jordan River flows south, which is a reference to the subconscious. So it's like that subconscious stream of thought that is always flowing in us and through us. And so Joshua is going to lead the people through that. We have a sort of repetition of the crossing of the Red Sea. Now, Joshua belongs to the tribe of Ephraim, which is the tribe that represents our faculty of will, the executive power of the mind. And when it is submissive to the Lord within, it becomes willingness, and he fulfills that criterion. Okay, so that's the first instruction. Then he says, here's what the Lord says: every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, as I promised to Moses. I would like to point out a difference here, that when Abraham was given a promise, he was told that all the land that he could see was his. And in the Middle East, they've been arguing over that for thousands of years since. But here, this is action. Every place where your feet shall tread. Okay, every place that you're willing, any good that you are willing to claim for yourself is being given to you. Sometimes we say, yes, there's a kingdom of infinite good. I do believe that. But do you believe that that good is there for you? So do you have the understanding, feet, that will allow you to claim that good. Do you know that the soles of your feet have a connection to every part of your body? So I thought that was an interesting difference between what was promised to Abraham. It's the same promise, but worded differently. Okay. And then he describes it. Goes from the Nile to the Fertile Crescent. He said, "No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life, as I was with Moses." In other words, there is no human authority. We have to wait for Jesus for that. "So I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you." Now listen to these words, because we've heard them before. "Be strong and of good courage, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law." Okay, remember that covenant. "Obey the law, and you are blessed. Disobey the law, and you are cursed." And what was the sign of that covenant? The Sabbath. Each of the covenants in the Old Testament has a sign. Noah had the rainbow. Abraham, circumcision. Moses, the Sabbath. Those are a sign of the covenant. So he's saying, be sure here, the Lord is saying, be sure to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. Here's another point. This is in verse 9. "This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate upon it day and night." There's a reference to that in Psalm 1. Meditate on the Lord day and night. Okay, that's how you succeed. "That you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Be not frightened, neither be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Ask yourself, do I truly believe and act as though I believe that there is no condition, no circumstance, no challenge out here that is more powerful than the power and presence of God within me? I think from time to time it's good to take an honest inventory and see, where are we on this journey? And I put it in quotes because it's a journey inward. It's not going anywhere. You're not in a different geographical region as a result of this. All right, so Joshua does that. And the first thing he does is he sends 2 spies to Jericho. Jericho happens to be the first city across the Jordan. He does this to assess the strength of these people, and what he's going to be needing in order to conquer Jericho. So he sends these spies, and this is a really interesting story, because there is a harlot by name of Rahab who lives in the wall of Jericho. Walls represent crystallized beliefs that keep out spirit. You cannot conquer these beliefs by force. Have you ever tried to rid yourself of a belief? Say, I am not poor. I am not. And the more you do that, the deeper you dig yourself into ignorance and error. But there is a way. There is a spiritual way. And this is such a good battle. So anyway, Rahab takes very good care of these spies. And she promises to help them. She hides them because the men of Jericho know that these spies are here. And so they're after them. So she hides them on the roof. And then when it's dark, she drops them out of her window on this long cord. And they get away and they're safe. And in exchange for this, they promised her that when Jericho is destroyed, that she and her family will be saved. Rahab is in the genealogy of Jesus and David. After the Battle of Jericho, she is taken safely, and she marries somebody named Salmon. It looks like salmon, but it's pronounced Salmon. And they have a child, Boaz, who marries Ruth. And so David and Jesus, part of this lineage. Now, she's a harlot. She represents love, human love, but she has that faithfulness and that steadfastness. And she never wavers. They give her a red cord to hang in the window, so they will know where she is, and they can save her when the Battle of Jericho is over. Red, symbolizing life. Well, the method of this conquest, it's very different. As I said, you can't conquer the intellect through force. The intellect is like a prison. It has a belief system, and if it's not connected to the source, it can be very rigid. So here was their instructions, that the Ark of the Covenant should go first into the Jordan, all right, priests carrying it, and the soles of their feet. Once the soles of their feet hit the water parts, and then the men of war, but they have no war implements. You know, they have no weapons. And then once the waters part, the Jordan is still, just like once you're in meditation and you transcend that stream of thought, your thinking process is settled down to a pure consciousness. And then when they get to the other side, then the water closes over again. So there they are. And after a couple of more preparations, one being that Joshua says that they all need to be circumcised because the men who had come with them from Egypt had all died in the wilderness. 40 years, of challenges, 40 years, and they had died. But all the ones that were born in the wilderness had to be circumcised. Circumcision representing that cleansing, the cutting off of any power that had been given to anything other than God. So a total cleansing. And then the second thing was they went to this place. Wait a second here. Oh yeah, that place was called Gilgal, which had been historically a place of sacrifice. So that was the big preparation. So they encamped there, and they waited there for 3 days until the men were healed, and then they approached Jericho. Now, here was the way that Jericho fell. The priests were to walk around the walls once a day with the ark. Okay. Once a day for 6 days. On the 7th day, they walked around 7 times. And when they blew their trumpets, there were these trumpets made out of ram's horns. And a trumpet always announces, like a king or some big event. Then all the men, when the trumpets were blown, then the men shouted, and the walls came tumbling down. That is how we get beyond those crystallized beliefs that keep us out of spiritual consciousness. We have to transcend them. We cannot fight them. Okay. Okay. So that is an interesting battle. Jericho means city of fragrance. It's also called Moon City, and it represents the intellect because, like the moon only has light because of the sun. And just like the intellect, which is a very useful tool, has no light of its own, it's dependent on spirit. And so if the intellect is separate from spirit, then these walls of crystallized beliefs keep ourselves feeling separate. They had learned a very interesting piece of information, those spies, when they went over, and that is that they were quite afraid of the Israelites because of their God, right? They were very afraid, which was good news for the Israelites. Okay, so 7 times. Of course, you understand what the number 7 means. The number 7 symbolizes completion in a relative sense, just as there were 7 days of creation, 7 being the completion of a cycle. And so they walked around the walls on the 7th day 7 times, bringing their spiritual understanding and downing those walls which had stood in the way of their spiritual understanding. Those walls representing those stubborn, willful beliefs, and they can be transcended. And so that's what happens. All things that are accomplished in 7s come directly from the Spirit of God and transform all levels of being, okay? Because it's bringing something from inside out into manifestation. 7 is the number also of manifestation. And the trumpets here, pronouncing the greatness of the presence of God, the spoken word, the shouting, the spoken word, when it is directly inspired by spiritual understanding. And so the walls came tumbling down. So I'll just read you this passage, and if you can keep in mind, this is found, a description of the battle is found in Joshua chapter 6. Okay. Now Jericho was shut up from within and from without. Because of the people of Israel, none went out and none came in. Jericho. And the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have given into your hand Jericho, with its king and mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all the men of war, going around the city once. Thus shall you do for 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark, and on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, the priests blowing the trumpets. And when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then all people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat." All right, completely gone. "And the people shall go up, every man straight before him. Take up the ark of the covenant, and let 7 priests bear 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark of the Lord." And he said to the people, "Go forward, march around the city, and let the armed men pass on before the ark of the Lord." That's the way to do battle. Okay, everything is accomplished with spirit. And the city falling, it's like a whole state of consciousness falls. Now, this is not the final victory either. Just as Moses reaching Sinai was not the final victory, so Jericho is not the final victory, because very soon after that, they suffer a defeat. Why is that? Because somebody violates the 10th commandment, which is covetousness. Oh, it violates probably a whole bunch of them. So they go on in to the promised land, and I don't know if any of you got sheets off of the internet where I have put definitions of words and different phrases. But the conquest of Jericho, it's with complete 7 union with the presence of God, and the power of the spoken word, trumpets, personal willfulness is broken down, the wall falls flat, and sense consciousness or intellect opens up to spiritual unfoldment, the children of Israel. So that is a metaphysical interpretation of that battle. All resistance to spiritual consciousness is destroyed. that is all within Jericho, are destroyed, until only Love, Rahab, and her family remains. And so it doesn't matter how difficult the obstacles appear. They crumble and resistance dissolves when we practice that daily silence, the Sabbath, conscious communion with God, that's the priests with the ark, and our thoughts, words, and deeds, the shouting, trumpet blowing, and marching express our awareness of God's omnipotence and omnipresence. Okay. This is, I printed this out on a handout. If you go to my website, newfoundationunity.org, it is lesson 6 or 7. I'm not sure which. 6, I think. Where I've interpreted these various things. So, is that all clear about how Jericho was won? We have to know that with God all things are possible. We have to let go of our doubts and our fears, as Joshua had to do. He was a pretty fearless guy, according to the text in the Bible. Because you remember initially when the 12 spies came back, they talked about these giants. And when Joshua sends 2 spies, they say, they're afraid of you. Nothing to worry about. But I think it's important to understand metaphysically how the only way to completely take power away from that willful, stubborn, conscious mind is to transcend it. And through your thought, word, and deed, express the power and presence of God. Wonderful story. I wish that all our battles were fought that way. So think about, I'm full of questions today, because when I have a class of people around me, I ask them questions, then they're not rhetorical questions, they're just questions for you to think about. How do you meet a challenge? Maybe you have a desire, something that seems really, really big and impossible to you. Do you say, that will never happen? Or do you say, I have that desire, and that desire is from God, and God is that power and presence within me, and if I have the desire, I also have the means to fulfill that desire. Is that how you think? Or do you wear down easily and see the obstacles? It's a way of evaluating how you approach situations in your life. Let's see. We still have 10 more minutes before the questions. We're ready for questions. But just to say that in the 8th chapter of Joshua, there is a town. It's Ai. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but we'll call it Ai. It means garbage heap. Okay. And the instructions were that you do not keep any of the spoils for yourself. Okay? All of it is to go to God. All right? You're not to keep any of this. Well, this guy Achan, who means troublemaker, it's that little piece within us that says, I could just take a little bit. It reminds me of the story of Ananias and Sapphira, who sold their land and they were going to give it all to the community. And then they decided to just hold back a little bit. And whoo! So this is something where there's no equivocation. Either you are serving God or you are serving mammon, but you can't do both. So this guy, Achan, is a troublemaker. And they do conquer Ai by burning it. So they purify it. All right? When fire is always a sign of the presence of God. And one of the functions of God is purify out all that is not God. So all of its inhabitants, all the rubbish heap, all right, is destroyed. And as the consciousness of the promised land, or as the consciousness gains of awareness of the abundant good, which is what the promised land represents, then the false pride and the egotism and all that had gone with human consciousness is burned. That is purified and eliminated from consciousness. So when it says the whole population is destroyed, that means the contents of the rubbish heap are purified. So that's what happens. Now, you remember the divining process, the Urim and the Thummim, which nobody knows exactly what they are, but it was a way of divining truth or error, positive or negative. And it was the high priest who would wear this breastplate, and it is speculated that in the folds of this breastplate were oracular images that then brought forth the guidance of God, the judgment of God. And so they needed to find out who the guy was who disobeyed God, because there were heavy-duty consequences for somebody disobeying God. And this is found in chapter 7. It says, okay, but the people of Israel broke faith in regard to the devoted things. So they took stuff from the temple. For Achan, the son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of the devoted things, and the anger of the Lord burned against the people of Israel. Remember, God's responsible for everything. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, east of Bethel, and said to them, go up and spy out the land. And the men went up and spied out Ai, and they returned to Joshua and said to him, let not all the people go up, but let about 200 or 300 men go up and attack Ai. Do not make this whole people toil up there, for they are but few. So it should have been an easy battle. So about 3,000 went up there from the people, and they fled before the men of Ai. And the men of Ai killed about 36 men of them, and chased them before the gate as far as Shebarim, and slew them at the descent. And the hearts of the people melted and became as water. So Joshua is grieving. And because of this, they knew that Israel has sinned. This is found in chapter 7, verse 11. Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant, which I commanded them. They have taken some of the devoted things out of the temple. They have stolen and lied. Okay, here we have so far 4 covenants that have been broken, and put them among their own stuff. Therefore the people of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turn their backs before their enemies because they have become a thing for destruction. I will be with you no more unless you destroy the devoted things from among you. So they have to find out who did it. And so one by one, first they have one member of each tribe come before the high priest. If that's not enough, then they have the household of each of the tribes come forth. And they have this method of divining to see if the guilty one is here or here or here. And so they go through all of that. And when they come to Judah, it turns out that it was Achan. And so, of course, he was stoned to death. And so we have not just one conquest, but this whole process of mastering all aspects of consciousness until the Christ is all that there is, and every thought and every feeling and every decision and every action is coming forth in that allows us to overcome things very easily. And we're all somewhere on this path. That's why I think this is a good story, where you can pick out parts of it and journal and say, how do I meet challenges? I know, because I have an understanding of law now I know that it's wrong not to do what this guy Achan did. Have I ever thought, oh, I'll just have a little bit of, my conscience is telling me not to eat this food, and I think, I'll just have a little bit. No. An understanding of the law, and of course, the covenant is pretty simple. Obey the law and you are blessed. Disobey the law and you are cursed. And they still think that they can get away with some things. So that's the lesson for today. I think there's a lot of rich points in this lesson. If I haven't made them clear, or if you have some questions or comments, it is 8 o'clock. So once again, 816-301-6304. And I'll ask you first, Linda, if you have any questions. No. Any comments? Do you keep a journal?
No, I don't. Well, no.
No. Okay.
That's a good idea.
It's a good idea, and there's a wonderful book called, it's by Ira Progoff, a journal workshop, in which you think of these different transition points in your life where it's really a choice point. And the thought being that with every transition into something new, there's an ending of something old. And so we were asked to come up with an image. We'd go into meditation and then come up with an image. And it was very enlightening, the images that came up, rather than trying to think things through. So if you'd rather kind of think, oh yeah, what was that situation to me? What image best describes that situation to me? And my approach. Excuse me. I find that the only drawback to the internet is that people are shy to call in. And I would truly like to hear from you all. I know I had a few comments by email, and that, of course, is always welcome as well. I don't know if any of you are wanting SEE credit. If you are, you should have told me before, but I'll still allow you to get credit if you are willing to answer some questions as part of a paper for that. So perhaps this would be a good time to sort of recap some of the points so that it can stay fresh in your mind. And think of you, first of all, the 40-year phases of your life. We all have to stay in one consciousness for as long as it takes to wake up to the fact that human consciousness, just taking reality from the outside, is not enough to live a full life. It's only in consciousness, in the heart, that we can comprehend reality. And then, once we realize that, we develop the spiritual practice out of which comes a mission. And that's an important piece, because I still know a lot of people who do not have a lot of clarity about what their assigned task is, what their divine plan is. Excuse me. But once you do, then the question is, do I have the faith and the courage? Can I trust the steps that I am given to bring it forth? And then once you say yes to that, that's when you find yourself in the wilderness and going through the challenges that are necessary to, first of all, have an understanding of law. I say, well, yeah, I understand the law, the spiritual law. The spiritual law is that as in mind, so in manifestation. Thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. We call this the law of mind action. Do we follow that? Well, we know what it is, but that doesn't mean that we live according to it, because we can't live according to it until we think and act from that deepest place within us. In meditation, we visit, and then we bring it out slowly. The fifth covenant in the Old Testament was one that was with Jeremiah and the Lord, and it was at that point that there was a realization that you can't obey all 613 laws. It's not possible. It makes you crazy. And so the law was written on the heart. So we have that law within us. And we have this interesting weaving. Oh, did somebody hang up? Hello? Hello?
To place this call, you will first need to dial an area.
I don't know. Whoever you are, Please call back. So, I don't know who it was. Anyway, somebody called. Hello?
Hi, Eleanor, it's Margot.
Hi, Margot.
I had a rather interesting question for you. You know, as we read these stories, obviously, if we take them on their face value, which we obviously don't, but they're really wonderful quotations, fairy tales of things, you know, that people wrote and so forth. And I was wondering, when the person who wrote this story about Joshua and so forth, did they have the same metaphysical understanding of the events as they were writing them, or was it more metaphorical, or exactly, you know, what do you see as their methodology or their purpose for having written these things?
The purpose for having written them, I'll start there, is that whenever anyone has a spiritual experience and wants to communicate it to other people, it has to be done in metaphor. It has to be done with imagery. You cannot communicate a spiritual experience, no matter how many words you use, and have someone else have that same experience. You know, like if I said to you, and you'd never been to Hawaii, and I said, "Oh, Hawaii, it is," and I can go through all the descriptions of gorgeous beaches and warm weather, but that has no meaning for you because you haven't experienced it. And so the authors were doing it as a way to communicate spiritual truth. Now, whether those who were on the receiving end, I think that's why there are 3 levels to each commandment. Because you understand as you, according to where you are in consciousness. Also, Hebrew and Aramaic especially, but in this case Hebrew, contains within it this interesting feature of having many levels of meaning. So if you look in the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, for instance, you'll find for Jericho or Joshua or for any of these characters, you'll find a multiplicity of levels, and so depending on where you are in consciousness, we even see this in some of the translations of the Bible, that people have mistook certain passages, and it has to do with where you are in your understanding of metaphysics. But the reason is that it's in the Bible is that it is truth. It's not true because it's in the Bible. It's in the Bible because it is spiritual truth, and it is relevant in our lives and for all times and for all situations. So yes, to your first question, your last question, which is what was the purpose of the author? And it's like if you mentioned like myths and fairy tales, there is a spiritual truth contained within all of the myths and fairy tales. That's why they are written. And you can find a message, a different message if you're a child than if you're an adult. And even in myths, you can read them several times, and as your consciousness grows, you find deeper meaning in stories. They were great storytellers in the Middle East.
Well, thank you, Eleanor. I appreciate your assistance. I'm going to hang up so in case anybody else wants to call in. But thank you so much. That really helps a lot.
Thank you for calling. Bye.
Okay, take care.
Bye. We still have about 15 more minutes, so if anyone else has a question or a comment, please do so. Next time will be the last class of this series, and we'll talk about what happens as the land in the Promised Land gets divided. That is symbolic of, like understanding each of our faculties as having a specific sphere of activity, like faith, strength, judgment, love, power, imagination, will, understanding, zeal, order, elimination, and life. Zeal, elimination, order, and life. Okay. So dividing the land. And there's actually 13 tribes because Joseph had 2 sons. And so each of his sons gets a tribe, but gets a parcel of land. But the Levites don't. Levites represent love, and everyone has to give to the Levites, the priestly class. So we'll talk about the division of land. But even though our faculties function quite in a distinct way, they all have to work together harmoniously, and no one faculty works alone. It's like the disciples. Jesus never sent out disciples by themselves. They always went in 2s or 3s. And Jesus said, you recall, when 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. Okay, so when 2 or 3, that's enough to bring forth the Christ in that situation. If you had faith, love, and judgment, those are the 3, Peter, James, and John. Those are the ones most often mentioned in the Bible. Those 3 were enough. Faith, the perceiving power of the mind. You perceive the presence of God. You perceive it to the point where you can form and shape the substance. James, the discernment or judgment. You can discern truth from non-truth. And love, the power of unification, the unifying power of the mind that allows us to know consciously that connection with the source. With those 3, Jesus did a lot of healing work with just those 3 disciples. But they all have a role, and some of them are in a more supportive role than others. But the first 4 disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, and John, form the foundation. Those are the foundational faculties upon which all the others are integrated. So we'll talk about the division of land. There's another tribe called the Gibeonites, And they're an interesting tribe, too, because they're very smart. And they make peace with Joshua. You see, all this land, this promised land, as you know, was and is occupied by other people. Okay. Other people lived there. They inhabited that land. And this particular tribe, called the Gibeonites, they were smart and made peace with Joshua before any war emerged there. So that went very smoothly. There were... Is that yours? Okay. Okay. So that's found in the 9th chapter of Joshua, where Gibeon surrenders. He's very clever and made a treaty. And the way that worked out was that the Gibeonites became servants to Joshua. So they got co-opted here. And that story symbolizes the divine illumination of worldly consciousness, Canaanites, when it is willing to surrender to spiritual unfoldment, Israelites, and become a servant to aid in greater spiritual understanding. Okay, so we can take each of these stories, each of the tribes, if you want to do that. Then there's the 5 kings of the Amorites. Okay, that's found in the 10th chapter of Joshua, where these 5 kings join forces against Joshua. And Joshua is winning the battle. The 5 kings represent the 5 senses which are attempting to be dominant in consciousness. Okay. They're 5 representing the 5 senses. All right, so they're trying to dominate. And so Joshua is winning, but he's afraid that the sun will go down before he has time to finish the job. And you know, at sundown, that's when it's dark, that's when the Sabbath begins and all. So, and so he makes the sun stand still, which is an interesting phenomenon. Meaning I can see a couple of interpretations there. Namely, that in the silence of your being, time literally does stand still. Also, that there is the capacity at a certain level of consciousness to control the elements of weather. All right? Collectively, we're not there yet, but Joshua made the sun stand still, so they completed the task and defeated the kings, the 5 kings who had all gotten together as one powerful sense consciousness. So that's how they conquered. They conquered the promised land. And so next week we'll talk about the 12 tribes of Israel. So, no callers, no questions, no comments. Is anybody there? Okay. Well, do some journaling, and if you come up with anything interesting, if you have any insights after this, then I will invite you to email some to me if you would feel more comfortable doing that. Also, I'll keep the phone on and the microphone on for a few minutes after the class in case anybody has any lingering questions or shyness, whatever. Okay, so I invite you, if you would care to make a donation to the new foundation school. Decided I'm going to call it a school since that's what it is turning out to be. You may do so online, or you may send a check to New Foundation Unity. Well, that's if you want to make a donation. Otherwise, hold your love offering, tithes, and gifts in your hands, and let's bless them with that newfound awareness that in the promised land there is infinite good. Good that is seeking to express in and through each one of us. The good that is awaiting our claiming of it. It's always been there. It will always be there. But until we know that it is there, and even more importantly, that it is there for us, we will not be able to reap the full harvest of that infinite storehouse of good. We carry that source around with us wherever we go, regardless of outer circumstances. That promised land, that infinite good, is always available to us. And so as we send our gifts forth, we bless them with our offertory statement: divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I give and all the good I receive. And so if you're out there and you would like to affirm that with me together, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all the good I give and all the good I receive. And we say, thank you, God. Still 6 minutes. I will be here. Tune in again next week and hear the story up to the point where we reach the judges, and that will be the next class. I will take a break for a couple of weeks after next week, and then we will begin on the judges, because the tribes were not yet united. They were still fighting amongst each other. And so each tribe, whenever trouble would emerge, a judge would pop up, take care of the situation, put out the fire, and then return. And after however many years they had judges, Samuel was begged to give Israel a king. So we're going from this conquest of the promised land to the period of the judges. There are a few wonderful judges. Hello? Hello?
Hello, thank you for calling. Please listen carefully as our menu options may have changed. You may...
Whoever you are, please call back. I just updated this phone. So it's doing funny things tonight. Anyway, please call back. Okay, so my hope is to go all the way through the Bible, all the various periods of the Bible, so that you have a good metaphysical understanding of an overview. And then we can go back and delve more deeply into any particular one. And so far, we've had those initial allegories. Then we've had the patriarchs, where we saw the development of faith in the figure of Abraham. But faith alone won't do it. Finally, we get to Joseph, the 12 sons of Jacob. Joseph being the favorite one, the power of imagination develops so we can form and shape substance. Then we get to the Exodus, which is where we are now, and we have an understanding of the law. Moses represents the law, a greater understanding of how God functions. The judges, that's our faculty of judgment. And then after that, we go to kings and prophets. Wonderful, wonderful stories. I love the Old Testament for that reason. So anyway, there's much more to come. Let me know how much of this you are understanding. Let me know if you would like to linger more on a particular story. I have no idea what level of understanding I'm talking to, how much experience you have had of metaphysics. Not that it matters, but it would help me to assess if I need to stay on one point for a longer period of time. So anyway, with that, I will say God bless you. Thank you for participating in the New Foundation School, and I wish you a very good night, and God bless you.